The morning light spilled across Fort Braxton's shooting range, casting long shadows over the empty firing positions. Master Sergeant Jack Harrington stood watching the sunrise, his weathered face solemn in the golden glow. At 62, he carried himself with the rigid posture of a man who'd spent 4 decades in uniform. His lined face and silver hair told stories of battles fought long before most of the soldiers on this base were born. The stillness of dawn was broken by footsteps crunching on gravel. Captain Miller approached with unusual formality for the early hour. "Master Sergeant, I've got news. Thomas Reynolds passed yesterday. Heart attack, they say." Jack's face remained impassive, but his eyes, those pale blue eyes that could calculate wind drift at 1,000 meters, suddenly seemed distant. "The funeral is Friday at Arlington. Command thought you should know." Jack nodded once. "Thank you, Captain." When Miller left, Jack removed his weathered service cap and ran a hand through his silver hair. Thomas Reynolds. The name unleashed a flood of memories. Cold Berlin nights in '88, the snow-covered forests of Estonia, whispered code words in smoky Eastern Bloc bars. They'd been ghosts together, moving through the shadowy world between East and West, when nuclear annihilation seemed just one miscalculation away. "Hawk," Jack whispered, using the call sign that only a handful of men had ever known. "What the hell happened to you?" Arlington National Cemetery embraced its silent residents with pristine order, white headstones standing in perfect formation like soldiers at attention for eternity. Jack stood at the periphery of the gathering, his dress uniform immaculate but uncomfortable after years of BDUs and range clothes. The ceremony was small, a few family members, some military personnel. Jack's gaze fixed on the young woman standing ramrod straight beside the flag-draped coffin. Staff Sergeant Sarah Reynolds wore her army dress uniform with the bearing of someone who understood its weight. 2 service medals gleamed on her chest. Combat Infantry Badge, Purple Heart. Jack knew her record. 2 tours in Afghanistan, wounded in action, reassigned to range maintenance at Fort Braxton, despite being one of the finest marksmen in the service. Thomas's daughter. When the rifles fired their salute, Jack noticed how Sarah didn't flinch, the mark of someone familiar with the sound of gunfire. As the ceremony concluded, he approached her, offering his hand. "Sergeant Reynolds, Jack Harrington, I served with your father." Sarah's face hardened instantly. Recognition flashed in her eyes, not of him personally, but of his name. "I know exactly who you are, Master Sergeant." Her voice was controlled but ice-cold. "You were my father's spotter in Berlin, and Baku." She emphasized the last word like an accusation. "Sarah." "Staff Sergeant Reynolds, Master Sergeant." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You shouldn't have come. Dad never forgave you for Baku. Neither will I." She turned sharply and walked away, leaving Jack standing alone by the fresh grave. As the mourners dispersed, Jack's trained eye caught movement in the distance. A man with a telephoto lens capturing the scene from behind a nearby monument. The man lowered his camera when he noticed Jack's attention, then disappeared among the headstones. 20 years of intelligence work had taught Jack to recognize surveillance when he saw it. Someone was watching, and that someone wasn't mourning. The Colorado mountains loomed large behind Fort Braxton's firing range. Sarah Reynolds moved methodically between firing stations, collecting spent brass in a large bucket. 6 months since Afghanistan, and this was what remained of her career, cleaning up after others practiced the skills she'd mastered. Her shoulder ached with the familiar dull pain that the doctors had declared permanent. Not severe enough for medical discharge, just enough to disqualify her from combat roles. The Army, in its infinite wisdom, had decided that a marksman with a 94% success rate in combat was best utilized picking up shell casings. "Reynolds," Sergeant Cole's voice carried across the range. "Command wants this place spotless. VIP demonstration today." Cole was a hard man, but fair. Unlike many, he'd read her service record and knew what she'd done in the mountains of Kunar Province. That earned her a measure of respect, even if he couldn't change her assignment. "Yes, Sergeant," she replied, continuing her work. 3 Humvees rolled up to the range an hour later, disgorging a collection of officers in various uniforms. Sarah recognized the American brass: Colonel Williams, Fort Braxton's commander, and several staff officers. The foreigners were unfamiliar, except one, a tall man with calculating eyes and a meticulously trimmed beard. Colonel Richard Bennett, British Special Reconnaissance Regiment. She'd seen his photo in military journals, usually accompanying articles about long-range combat operations. One of Britain's most celebrated marksmen. Sarah continued collecting brass, moving methodically down the firing line as the officers gathered for their demonstration. She paused when she noticed a target set at extreme distance, barely visible on the mountainside. "That's gotta be over 3,000 meters," she whispered to herself. 3,285 meters, to be precise, came a British accented voice from behind her. Sarah turned to find Colonel Bennett studying her with clinical interest. "Quite the challenge," he continued, "though purely theoretical, I'm told. No one here has actually hit it." "Sounds like a waste of a good target, sir," Sarah replied neutrally. Bennett's smile didn't reach his eyes. Indeed. The demonstration proceeded with American shooters performing competently at conventional distances. Bennett watched with thinly veiled condescension, occasionally murmuring comments to his aides. When invited to demonstrate his own skills, he stepped up to the firing line with practiced confidence. His first shots at 800 and 1,200 meters were flawless. Center mass hits with minimal adjustment between rounds. Then he turned his attention to the distant target at 3,285 meters. "That one," he said casually. "Has anyone actually attempted it?" Colonel Williams shifted uncomfortably. "The environmental factors make it extremely challenging, Colonel." "I see," Bennett replied, handing back the rifle. "Perhaps best left theoretical after all." He paused. "Although, in Afghanistan, I did manage a confirmed kill at 2,970 meters." The boast hung in the air like a challenge. Sarah set down her bucket and stepped forward. "Sir, permission to attempt the shot." Every head turned toward her. Colonel Williams looked startled. Sergeant Cole moved to intercept her. "Reynolds, get back to work," he hissed. Colonel Williams raised a hand. "Who is this, Sergeant?" "Staff Sergeant Sarah Reynolds, sir. Range maintenance." Bennett examined Sarah with newfound interest. "I'm sorry," he said, amusement evident in his tone. "Did the cleaning lady just volunteer for precision shooting?" Several of the British officers chuckled. Sarah felt heat rise in her face but kept her expression neutral. "Staff Sergeant Sarah Reynolds, sir. 2 tours in Afghanistan. Sniper qualified. Personal best confirmed kill at 2,847 meters." The laughter stopped. Bennett's expression shifted subtly, the condescension remaining but now mixed with curiosity. "And you believe you can hit a target at 3,285 meters with unfamiliar equipment in conditions you haven't studied, after spending the morning collecting brass like a common laborer?" "I'd like to try, sir." Bennett smiled coldly. "By all means. Though perhaps we should make this interesting. If you miss, you continue your custodial duties without complaint. But if by some miracle you hit the target, well, I suppose I owe you an apology." Sarah nodded once. "I accept those terms, sir." As she stepped to the firing line, she noticed a familiar figure on the periphery of the range, Jack Harrington, watching intently. His presence unsettled her, but she pushed the feeling aside. Focus. One shot, one moment. The rifle was a standard M24, not customized for extreme long-range work. Sarah took her time, calculating variables. Wind speed approximately 8 napier from the southwest, but shifting at higher elevations. Temperature 53 degrees Celsius. Humidity high. She'd need to compensate for significant bullet drop, nearly 400 feet over that distance. Bennett stood nearby, his presence designed to unsettle her. "You know," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "in my experience, the most dangerous thing on a battlefield isn't the enemy. It's an overconfident soldier who doesn't know their limitations." Sarah ignored him, settling into position behind the rifle. She established her natural point of aim, then made adjustments for wind and distance. The crosshairs were positioned well above and to the left of the target, so far off that an inexperienced shooter might think she was aiming at the wrong hillside entirely. Her breathing slowed to the familiar rhythm her father had taught her since childhood. Inhale deeply, Exhale half. Hold. In that moment of perfect stillness, she squeezed the trigger. The rifle bucked against her shoulder. Through the scope, she watched the target area. At this distance, it would take nearly 4 seconds for the bullet to reach its destination. 1, 2, 3, 4. Impact, called the spotter. Stand by for location. A tense pause followed as the spotters examined the target through high-powered telescopes. Center mass. Dead center. The range erupted in astonished voices. Bennett's face registered shock, quickly masked by professional composure. Sarah rose slowly from the firing position, her expression neutral despite the triumph surging through her. "Bloody hell," whispered one of the British officers. "That's impossible." Bennett approached Sarah with a measured smile. "Staff Sergeant Reynolds, that was exceptional. Perhaps the American military has been underutilizing your talents." Sarah met his gaze evenly. "Yes, sir, I believe they have." From the edge of the range, Jack Harrington watched the interaction with narrowed eyes. He recognized the calculated interest in Bennett's expression. He'd seen it before, 20 years ago, when promising shooters were identified for a program that officially didn't exist. Sarah found Jack waiting outside the barracks that evening. The sunset painted the mountains blood red behind him. "What do you want?" "Harrington?" "To talk," he replied simply. "About your father. About that shot today." "Nothing to discuss." "You used the hawk breath technique for that shot. The controlled half exhale followed by the 2-beat hold." Jack stepped closer. "Only 2 people in the world knew that technique. Your father and me." Sarah hesitated. "Dad taught me when I was 12. "He would. Best natural shooter I ever saw." Jack glanced around. "But we shouldn't talk here. Bennett has eyes everywhere." "Why would Bennett care about me?" "Because you're Thomas Reynolds' daughter. Because you just made a shot that only a handful of people in the world could make." Jack's voice dropped. "And because your father didn't die of natural causes." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "What are you saying?" "Your father and I weren't just SEAL Team 6. We were part of something called Project Longbow, a classified program during the Cold War that trained elite marksmen for specialized operations." "Assassinations," Sarah translated flatly. "Among other things. Your father left the program in '99 when he discovered that certain elements were operating outside government authority, selling their services to private interests. He gathered evidence, hid it somewhere safe." Jack glanced around again before continuing. "Bennett isn't just SAS. He runs what's left of Longbow, a private kill squad for hire, targeting political figures, business rivals, anyone if the price is right." "And you expect me to believe this conspiracy theory because your father tried to expose them. Because 3 weeks before he died, he called me warning that they'd found him." Jack's voice was tight with controlled emotion. "And because Bennett just invited you to an international shooting competition that doesn't officially exist." Sarah stared at him, mind racing. "How do you know about the invitation? He only mentioned it an hour ago." "Because that's how they recruit, or eliminate threats." Jack held her gaze. "Sarah, I've spent 20 years tracking these people from the inside. Your father thought I betrayed him, but I stayed to gather evidence, to finish what he started." Sarah remained silent, evaluating the old soldier before her. Finally, she spoke. "Prove it." The next 3 weeks transformed Sarah's life. Jack established a rigorous training regime, pushing her wounded shoulder to its limits. Sergeant Cole, initially skeptical, became her dedicated spotter after Jack explained the true stakes. "My brother served with your father," Cole revealed one day as they calibrated a scope. "He died in what the Army called a training accident in 2002. Never believed it was an accident." Jack's training methods were unorthodox, borrowed from his SEAL days and adapted for their current situation. They practiced at odd hours, changing locations frequently, always alert for surveillance. "Bennett wants to evaluate your skills," Jack explained, "but he's also studying your techniques, your habits, your weaknesses, standard longbow protocol." On their 10th day of training, the first attack came, A shot cracked past Sarah's head during a nighttime training session, missing her by inches. Jack examined the impact site with a flashlight. 7.62 millimeter subsonic. Fired from approximately 600 meters judging by the entry angle. He pointed to a ridge. Professional work, not meant to kill, meant to scare. Or to test my reaction under fire, Sarah suggested. Jack nodded grimly. You're learning. Cole discovered a hidden camera the next day, positioned to record their training sessions. The device was military-grade, with satellite transmission capabilities. They're watching everything, Cole muttered, crushing the device under his boot. That evening, Sarah showed Jack her father's sniper journal, a leather-bound book filled with ballistic tables, range calculations, and shooting techniques. I've had this since I joined the Army, she explained. I always thought it was just technical notes. Jack examined the pages carefully, stopping at a series of numbers labeled as wind adjustments. These aren't wind calculations, he said quietly. This is a code we used in Longbow, Hawkeye cipher. Using the Army Sniper Field Manual FM2310 as a key, they decoded the message hidden in the numbers. Evidence on Longbow operations in secure server. Access code Nest Site 1991. Contact William Harrington if compromised. Trust no one in command. Sarah looked up sharply. William Harrington? My brother, Jack confirmed. Former admiral, naval intelligence. He helped shut down the official Longbow program in 2001. He's speaking at the International Security Conference in Wyoming next week, 10 miles from the competition site. Understanding dawned on Sarah's face. The competition isn't the mission. It's cover for an assassination. Multiple assassinations, Jack corrected. Anyone who knows about Longbow's origins is a target. Thomas, William, me. And now me, Sarah added soberly. 2 days before the competition, Captain Lisa Hendricks from Defense Intelligence Agency made contact. Petite but commanding, she met them in a secluded section of the base's motor pool. We've been watching Bennett for 18 months, she explained. 12 confirmed kills across 3 continents, all disguised as accidents or attributed to terrorist groups. Why haven't you moved on him? Cole asked. No proof connecting him directly. He never pulls the trigger himself. Hendricks showed them satellite photos of the Wyoming facility. We believe this competition is staging for a major operation, eliminating everyone who could expose Longbow's transition from government program to private enterprise. My brother is the primary target, Jack said, but they'll have secondary targets too. Standard protocol. Hendricks nodded. 4 other former intelligence officials will be at that conference, all with knowledge of the original Longbow. So what's the plan? Sarah asked. We can't just call and warn them. Bennett would know immediately. We play along, Jack decided. Sarah competes as expected. Cole and I will find a way to reach the conference. Hendricks will coordinate with her team for extraction once we have proof. Sarah studied the facility layout. There's a problem. The competition area is completely isolated, communications jammed, access controlled. How do we get out if needed? Jack smiled grimly. Sometimes you have to create your own exit strategy. The Wyoming training facility nestled among snow-capped peaks, its isolation both tactical and strategic. Vehicles carrying competitors from 12 countries arrived under heavy security. Sarah noted the military precision with which everything operated. This was no ordinary competition. Bennett greeted each team personally, his manner professionally cordial but his eyes constantly assessing. When he reached Sarah's group, his smile widened fractionally. Staff Sergeant Reynolds, I'm pleased you accepted our invitation. His gaze shifted to Jack. Master Sergeant Harrington, I wasn't aware you were joining us. Wouldn't miss it, Jack replied evenly. I've been working with the staff sergeant as her spotter. How convenient. Bennett's tone suggested it was anything but. Well, the more the merrier. Though I should mention, we use assigned spotters during the competition. Neutrality concerns, you understand? The message was clear. They would be separated. The competitors were housed in Spartan barracks with strict security protocols, ostensibly to prevent cheating, actually to monitor every movement. Sarah's roommate was a stone-faced Russian woman who barely spoke. During the orientation briefing, Sarah surveyed the other competitors. Major Lars Gruber from Germany caught her eye briefly, a subtle nod that confirmed Hendricks had allies in place. Captain Ivanov from Russia, however, struck her as dangerous. His eyes held the flat, calculating look of a killer, not a sportsman. Bennett outlined the competition format. 3 days of increasingly difficult challenges. Day 1, stationary targets at varying distances. Day 2, fieldcraft and environmental shooting. Day 3, the ultra-long-range challenge, a 3,500-meter shot with identical equipment to ensure fair competition. He smiled at the assembled shooters. Of course, this is about more than just competition. It's an opportunity to demonstrate skills that might be valuable in other contexts. My organization is always looking for exceptional talent. The recruitment pitch was hardly subtle. Sarah wondered how many in the room already worked for Bennett's shadow organization. That night, moving silently through the darkened facility, Sarah located Bennett's office. The lock yielded to techniques Jack had taught her. Inside, she found a laptop, secured, but not beyond her capabilities thanks to Hendricks' crash course in intelligence tradecraft. The files confirmed their worst fears. Operation Legacy Trigger detailed plans to eliminate 5 targets during the security conference. Bennett had positioned shooters at strategic locations surrounding the conference center. The competition was both cover and final evaluation for potential recruits. Sarah was photographing documents when a noise in the corridor forced her to hide. Through a crack in the supply closet door, she watched Bennett enter with 2 men she recognized from the competition, Ivanov and a Swedish shooter named Lindstrom. The timetable has accelerated, Bennett was saying. 2 teams, 5 targets. Harrington is mine personally. The others will appear to be terrorist attacks. Message sent to anyone else considering exposure. And the American woman? Ivanov asked. She's not reliable. Reynolds has potential beyond her father. If she proves cooperative, we recruit. If not, unfortunate accident during tomorrow's exercises. Bennett's voice was clinical. Either way, we'll have access to whatever evidence Thomas Reynolds concealed. Sarah slipped out through the window when they left, heart pounding. They knew about her father's evidence, and tomorrow they would either recruit her or kill her. Day 1 of the competition proceeded with mathematical precision. Shooters rotated through firing positions, engaging targets at distances from 600 to 1,200 meters. Sarah performed well, 5th place by day's end, but deliberately avoided excellence that might draw additional scrutiny. Bennett watched her through binoculars, expression unreadable. When the day's events concluded, he approached her with practiced casualness. Impressive shooting, Staff Sergeant, though I know you're capable of more. Saving something for tomorrow, sir. Wise, though I'd like to discuss your future this evening if you have time. My office, 2100 hours? Sarah nodded. I'd be honored, sir. The meeting was exactly as Jack had predicted. Bennett spoke of Sarah's potential, her father's legacy, the limitations of conventional military service. He never explicitly mentioned assassination or murder, only specialized operations and private sector opportunities. Your father was one of our best, Bennett said, pouring aged scotch into 2 glasses. You have his natural talent but potentially greater discipline. You knew my father well? I recruited him originally, Bennett handed her a glass. When the Cold War ended, governments needed deniable operations more than ever, but with tighter oversight. We provided necessary services without bureaucratic constraints. Until he left, Bennett's expression hardened momentarily. Thomas became concerned about operational parameters. He didn't understand that the world had changed. Enemies weren't just nation-states anymore. So you expanded your client base. We adapted. Bennett studied her. You understand adaptability, don't you, Sarah? The Army discarded you despite your talents. We never would. Sarah sipped her scotch, playing the role of the disillusioned soldier. What exactly would I be doing? Initially, training and evaluation, then specialized operations based on your skill set. Generous compensation, new identity if desired, complete operational support. Bennett leaned forward. But first, a gesture of good faith. Your father kept certain documentation that belongs to our organization. Records, operational details, sensitive materials. I don't have any documentation. Perhaps not knowingly, but Thomas would have secured it somehow, made provisions. Bennett's eyes were calculating. Finding those materials would demonstrate your commitment. Sarah maintained her neutral expression, though her mind raced. I'll need to think about it. This is a significant decision. Of course, though I should mention, tomorrow's events will be considerably more challenging. A good performance might strengthen your position considerably. The threat was barely veiled. Perform well, or join her father. Day 2 featured fieldcraft challenges, shooting from unstable positions, moving targets, unknown distances, and environmental complications. Sarah excelled, her combat experience evident in each calculated shot. By day's end, she had climbed to second place, behind only Bennett's hand-picked British shooter. You've made quite an impression, Gruber told her quietly as they cleaned their rifles. Bennett is considering accelerating the timetable. How soon? Tonight? He doesn't trust Harrington's presence. The conference begins tomorrow morning. Sarah nodded almost imperceptibly. Tell Hendricks we move at 00400. Back in her quarters, Sarah found Jack waiting, a breach of protocol that spoke to the urgency of the situation. Bennett's men grabbed me during the second event, he said without preamble. Tried to extract information about your father's evidence. Are you compromised? No, I fed them exactly what we planned, but they'll move against us tonight. A knock at the door silenced them. Sergeant Cole entered, his expression grim. They've changed the security codes. All external communications are down, and there are men watching the perimeter with thermal optics. Sarah checked her watch. 2130 hours. We need a new extraction plan. Jack's eyes gleamed with the cold calculation that had kept him alive through decades of covert operations. Not extraction, distraction. The ultra-long-range challenge began at 0900. Media crews, carefully selected and screened, positioned themselves around the firing line. Bennett had arranged this public spectacle as cover for the operation already underway at the conference center 10 miles away. The competitors drew lots for shooting order. Sarah drew position 8, exactly as they had hoped. Jack and Cole had disappeared hours earlier, their absence explained as equipment preparation. The first 7 shooters struggled with the 3,500-meter shot. Only Gruber managed to hit the target at all, striking the outer edge. When Sarah's turn came, Bennett stood nearby, watching with predatory focus. Remember, Staff Sergeant, this shot could determine your future. Sarah took position behind the rifle with methodical precision. Through her scope, she studied the distant target, calculating variables with practiced efficiency. The wind was steady, temperature cool, humidity moderate. Perfect conditions for what she had planned. Her breathing slowed to the familiar rhythm. Inhale deeply. Exhale half. Hold. But instead of firing at the target, Sarah swiftly adjusted her aim and squeezed the trigger. The bullet struck a fuel tank 800 meters away, penetrating the metal shell. Before anyone could react, she fired again, this time at an electrical transformer mounted nearby. The transformer exploded in a shower of sparks, igniting the leaking fuel. Secondary explosions followed as nearby equipment caught fire. Alarms blared across the facility. In the chaos, Sarah abandoned her position and sprinted toward the motor pool where Cole waited in an idling Humvee. Gunfire erupted behind her, Bennett's security forces responding with practiced efficiency. Go! She shouted as she leapt into the vehicle. Cole accelerated through the gate, crashing through the barricade as bullets pinged off the armored chassis. 3 miles down the road, they rendezvoused with Jack and Hendricks in a civilian SUV. Bennett's already at the conference, Jack reported as they transferred to the unmarked vehicle. Satellite shows his team in position around the perimeter. They're moving early. Sarah studied the aerial imagery on Hendricks' laptop. The church tower provides the best firing position for the main hall, and that hotel rooftop covers the eastern approach. Bennett will take the hotel position, Jack said with certainty. He always preferred elevated positions with multiple escape routes. The drive to Ravenwood Hall took 17 minutes, each second amplifying the danger to the conference attendees. The elegant country estate had been converted into a conference center, its Victorian grandeur at odds with the deadly game unfolding around it. Security was visible but not overwhelming. The threat had not yet been communicated effectively. Jack attempted to reach his brother by phone, but the call went to voicemail. "We're too late to evacuate," Hendricks said, checking her watch. "The keynote begins in 12 minutes. Sarah made a rapid assessment. "I'll take the church tower. Jack, get inside and try to reach your brother. Cole, cover the western approach. Hendricks, your team needs to secure the perimeter." They separated with military efficiency, each moving toward their objective. Sarah approached the old stone church, her movement casual but purposeful. The structure offered a perfect vantage point of the conference hall's main entrance, exactly where dignitaries would gather after the morning session. Inside the church, she moved silently up the spiral staircase to the bell tower. As she neared the top, she heard soft movements, someone already in position. Drawing her sidearm, she crept forward. The shooter had established a professional hide, his rifle aimed through a narrow opening in the louvered windows. His focus was complete, attention fixed on his scope. Sarah's first shot caught him in the shoulder, spinning him away from his weapon. Her second round struck his hand as he reached for a backup pistol. The man collapsed, wounded but alive, exactly as intended. They needed witnesses, not martyrs. Securing the shooter with zip ties, Sarah took position at his abandoned rifle. Through the scope, she swept the conference center entrance, identifying security personnel and scanning for threats. Her gaze settled on the hotel rooftop across the street. There, a glint of metal in the morning sun. A figure in position behind a ventilation unit. Bennett. At the same moment, she spotted Admiral William Harrington emerging from the conference center, flanked by security but vulnerable in the open courtyard. Bennett's rifle shifted, tracking the movement. Sarah calculated distance, 140 meters. Significant but manageable. Wind, 6 mph crosswind from the west. She made rapid adjustments to the captured rifle's scope. Inhale deeply. Exhale half. Hold. Her shot cracked across the morning air. Through the scope, she watched as her bullet struck Bennett's rifle, sending it spinning from his grasp. He recoiled, clutching his hand where metal fragments had torn into flesh. But the first shooter in the church tower had not been alone. A second gunman emerged from the shadows behind Sarah, weapon raised. A shot rang out, but it was Cole in the doorway, his timing perfect. The second assassin crumpled to the floor. In the courtyard below, Jack had reached his brother, urgently pulling him toward cover. A third shooter appeared on a balcony overlooking the courtyard, rifle raised. Jack saw the threat and reacted instantly, shoving his brother aside and lunging forward. The shot meant for Admiral Harrington struck Jack in the chest. He fell heavily to the stone pavement as security forces converged, returning fire and neutralizing the threat. Sarah watched in horror through the scope as Jack lay motionless, blood spreading across his shirt. Then the radio crackled. "Target secure," came Hendricks' voice. "Bennett in custody, all shooters neutralized." But the victory felt hollow as Sarah raced down the church steps toward the courtyard where Jack Harrington had made his final sacrifice. 1 year later, Master Sergeant Sarah Reynolds stood before a class of 20 elite soldiers at Fort Bragg's Advanced Sniper School. Her uniform bore the insignia of her new rank, a promotion awarded after the Wyoming operation exposed and dismantled Bennett's network. "Precision shooting isn't about the weapon," she told the attentive faces. "It's about the person behind it, their focus, their discipline, their heart." The evidence from Thomas Reynolds' secure server had provided the final pieces needed to prosecute Bennett and his associates. 13 former Longbow operatives now faced justice for crimes spanning 2 decades. Admiral Harrington had personally overseen the investigation, honoring his brother's sacrifice. After class, Sarah found Sergeant Cole, now Master Sergeant Cole, waiting outside her office. "Ready for the ceremony?" he asked. She nodded, touching the small pendant hanging around her neck, a polished shell casing from her father's first rifle. "As ready as I'll ever be." The Jack Harrington Memorial Shooting Range was dedicated that afternoon, with Admiral Harrington unveiling the plaque. The inscription read, "In honor of Master Sergeant Jack Harrington, who lived with silent honor and died saving others. A true ghost spotter." After the ceremony, Sarah visited two graves at Arlington, her father and Jack Harrington, buried just 50 yards apart. She placed a single shell casing on each headstone. "You were right, Dad," she whispered. "The shell casings tell our story. They mark where we've been and what we've done." She stood at attention and rendered a perfect salute to both graves. "Mission complete, gentlemen. Now it's my turn to continue the legacy." As she walked away through the perfect rows of white stones, Sarah touched the pendant at her neck, a physical reminder that honor, like marksmanship, required precision, discipline, and an unwavering commitment to the truth. Some battles were fought in the shadows, but true victory came in bringing darkness to light. In the distance, a rifle shot cracked, the evening salute at Arlington. Sarah didn't flinch. She knew that sound wasn't just the report of a weapon, but the echo of a legacy she would carry forward with silent honor.